Hi, today I want to show you how Wized works on the back end. So how does Wized work? How was it built? What is it doing? Is it code or not? And all of those questions, we're going to go step by step through them. So when you're going to build your exciting web application in Wized with amazing web app functionality and smooth experiences, you may ask yourself the question, now, how does this work? Is Wized some witchcraft that all of a sudden will turn my Webflow site into a web application? Or how does this work, right? You may ask yourself the question. And I'm going to show you today how this works, easy, understandable for somebody who may not be as profound to code as data scientist or something like this. So I'm going to give you the version that I understand too of how Wized works and how does it benefit what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So when I configure things in Wized, I'm going to set actions, requests, and variables, right? And the neat thing about that is Wized has two components. It has like the general embed, it says v1, v2, depending on what you use, and it has the configuration file. Now, if you were to turn those files that Wized provides you here into your browser, you will see, okay, that is the configuration file, and yeah, that thing is something. It seems to be part of some framework, but it's loading more things from chunks, which also adds more to the extensiveness of what Wized is doing here. But you may don't know what that means and what it's doing here. So I want to explain you what you're working with, so that when somebody asks you, a client or an investor, what is this built on, you can actually tell them with confidence it's built on a scalable, maintainable, vanilla JavaScript framework, and I'm going to use Wized to reduce the work that I have to put into it, because I see an easy to use interface like this while still making things like this and things like this or things like this or like this without having to do all of this myself, right? So I want to show you how this works. So in Wized, I'm configuring based on attributes actions. In this example, I'm going to use actions for simplification purposes on top of elements targeted by ID. Now, I'm going to get two files. As I mentioned, the configuration file, this will contain all my configuration. Now, it's hard to read because, it's not formatted. But if I'm going to format the configuration file, we see that we're going to define a global object here. And we call that window.wized_config_def. This will include such things like our folders, generated timestamp. We will have, if we would have requests, we would have requests in here. And we have the type. This is a development version. We have our cookies, right? They would all live in here like we have it in this example for variables. So Wized will define variables, and it will define it as an array. Like here, it goes all the way down. I have a lot of variables. But it will say variable. We will have an object in here, name, count1, and it will give each variable a unique ID and the current value. This is what I'm configuring in the data store. I only do count1, return value, persistent storage or not, and then you will see that this is the configuration that is inside of here. This is how Wized does that. And then this is basically just a JSON structure. I mean, not just it, there's a whole science behind that. But this is how Wized gives you like this very modular and flexible framework to work with. And then we have our actions. Now, this is where logic happens. So if I have attributes in here, I'm going to have a name. This is counter button 1. Now, if I'm going to go to my attribute here, we see we have the name counter button 1, right? And we can do things with it. We have an on-event action on click. So if I'm going now here, we see we have attributes, name counter button 1. I'm having a unique ID for it. It's an element. And then I have my actions in here. I'm going to take the variable with this ID, right? And this ID was specified up here in the count1 with the current value. And then I'm going to go to set variable, click, and I'm going to return this logic in here, and this is on event with a setting. And this is basically how Wized actions work, and a similar principle applies to requests on a more high-level basis, because we're doing API calls here, and we have a whole server-side component, which is really a unique work of art, of technology art that has been created here. But this is, to get the general idea of it, this is what you're doing in Wized. Therefore, if I'm going to create like a test action, let's do that. I love experiments. And let's base this on a custom condition. And I just want to do a run function here. If I would write return, right? And I would go to my configuration right in here. I will be able to return the configuration, and I will get all my details in here that are specified. And I can do dot variables, and I will get all my variables that are being set in global objects. This is how Wized works. Now, you don't have to interact with that. If you were using a different front-end framework, you would have to worry about state management and more complex things, right? And you would, first of all, have to worry about that part here, which doesn't seem like much fun. So Wized is like breaking the things you do into a JSON structure, and then it provides you this big framework to make this specific structure work, right? So this is basically what we're doing here on a high level. There's way more going on, but I want to give you just to get the general gist of it. This is what we're doing here. Now, you may look at that file and say, doesn't seem much, but I can tell you there's more to that file, because this is the general file, so we're importing certain states in here, and then we're importing chunks, which is just more data that is being imported, because your browser works better like loading 5 times at the same time than one big thing. This is also why Embed 2 is now way faster than Embed 1, because it's simultaneously loading multiple things rather than only one thing. But then we have the definitions here. I don't understand most of it because it's web packaged, but this is basically high level the configuration that Wized is doing for you based on this JSON structure. So this code is making this JSON structure work and interact on your site. This is the value that Wized is providing you here, right? And this is like a pre-structured framework. And now there's more to that, because we have the chunks. So the chunks, this is like the big improvement that I think happened between Embed 1 and Embed 2, is because now Wized is not loading just one big file. It is loading multiple big files at the same time, right? So we have that thing right in here. And if I were to copy this page again, we will see, and I can beautify that code, that I'm loading, right, even more data. Like, we're now at thousands of lines of code here. This is all happening on the back end, right? You don't need to do this in Wized. Wized gives you the flexibility of not having to worry about those things. And then you see this chunk here. Look at that. This chunk here with all that data it's loading even more information from even more chunks. Like, I could do this for ages until we are at chunk 1,000,000 or so on. Look at that. Like, we have another chunk also with data. And then, you get the idea. There is a lot of things going on here because it is an extensive framework. It is a real, we're not talking here like about a toy or like something that is like Zapier or something that is hacking things around. We're talking here about an extensive front-end framework, right? And then this is now where the chunk importing stops, as I can see it here. But look at that. This is just the first chunk. Like, we have this, and we have this. Now, if I would go to the second chunk, we will probably have a similar principle in here, right? When I would be going in here, and I did a typo, or did I? Didn't I? Let's see. Right, where I would have this chunk. Let's remove the period, and I may have selected the wrong thing. But we have multiple of those. We have now 1, 2, 3, 3 more to go. So we're talking here about a lot of code, and this code is web packaged. So meaning this is already minimized code, right? This is built for scalability, right? This is web packaged code. It's very minimized code structure that is easier and faster to load on your browser, right? Because now if you would have like a whole big thing going on, your site would be not as fast and not as reactive, right? This is people that know Embed 1 know what I'm talking about. And all this tens of thousands of lines of code running in the background and giving you this stable structure to build your web application on have this wonderful UI of I'm going to click here and this is going to count up. And the moment I click on here, like this is updating in real time. Just imagine how much engineering resources, how much just well thought through trial and error had to go into in building something like this. And I think this is what you're paying for Wized for. You're not paying for a tool that will give your web app more functionality. You are paying pennies, dollars, like compared to what an engineer would cost, it's nothing. You're paying to get, think of it like this. There is this big engineering resource or this big engineering effort that needs to be put into something like this. And Wized is saying, this is as big as this here. And you can get this whole big thing for this small piece, right? This small piece. And we're going to sell this small piece for this big thing, which is like customizable. This is why you have the configurator for like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the cost that we put into developing this super extensive, scalable framework. And I think this is what Wized is, and understanding how this works on the back end also helps you in seeing the value that Wized produces for you. Because you would have to write all of this code on an extensive basis if you would not use Wized. And we see we're talking here thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code. And you cannot do this with ChatGPT. Of course, you can try hacking things around, but if one of those lines is not really good, you're potentially risking security issues and all of that. Now, this is the value I see in Wized, and this really helps me build prototypes for web applications way faster, way quicker, and way easier. Now, could you build something like this yourself? If you have 2 years in developing your product, certainly. If you have a year or multiple months and a team of multiple people, it may be worth it. But if you don't want to spend $1 million a year for an engineering team, and you rather prefer to spend $1,000 a year on Wized, Wized is probably a very good alternative for you. And I would highly recommend you to consider Wized in developing your web applications. Now, of course, you have to write a little bit of code, but you don't have to write the tens of thousands of lines that Wized already has wrote for you. And I think this is really where the beauty comes in. And I'm happy to be a part of this wonderful community, and I'm happy to have this wonderful tool working in favor of the projects I'm building on to help me ship things faster and to turn my creativity and to turn my ideas into real working software. And yeah, thank you so much for being on this journey together with me and watching my videos. And thank you so much for all your time. I hope that this answered most of the questions and also helped you see the value in Wized that I see since day one. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.